It started with a missed train and a dumb, impulsive, yeah, of course you can crash here. I hadn't seen Liam in almost 2 years. Not in person, anyway. The occasional birthday DM or random comment on a photo was all we'd exchanged since college, when we'd lived on the same floor freshman year and used to split late-night Uber Eats while half watching Netflix and pretending we were going to study. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text from him around 9:30 p.m. "Hey, I'm in the city for a client meeting, missed the last train. Any chance I can crash at your place tonight?" I stared at the message longer than I'd admit. It was one of those moments where your stomach does something before your brain even gets involved. I hadn't thought about Liam in a while, but seeing his name light up my screen unlocked something. Like suddenly remembering a song you forgot you loved. I said yes. Too fast, probably. But it was cold out, and he was stranded, and he had nowhere else to go. What kind of person would I be to say no? He showed up at my door 25 minutes later, cheeks pink from the wind, hair tousled in that perfect way it always was. Same smirk, same soft eyes, same stupid charm that used to undo me when I was 19 and pretending I wasn't into guys, especially not ones like Liam. "Dude," he said, stepping into the warmth of my tiny apartment. "You're a lifesaver." I closed the door behind him and shrugged. "You're lucky I had no plans tonight. Or ever." He laughed, brushing snow from his coat. "You always did have a rich social life." I gave him the guest towel and pointed toward the bathroom. "Still showering at night?" "Still creepy that you remember that," he called over his shoulder, already walking down the hall. But I did remember. I remembered a lot of things I hadn't realized were still sitting quietly in the back of my mind. Like how Liam always smelled like citrus shampoo and spearmint gum. How he never wore socks inside. How he hummed when brushing his teeth. I made tea while he was in the shower, because apparently I turn into a mom whenever someone's staying over. I was half sitting on the edge of the couch when he came out in the joggers and old t-shirt. I let him borrow. He looked comfortable. "Your place is cozy," he said, towel over his shoulder. That's the polite way of saying small. He flopped onto the couch beside me like we were still in college, like no time had passed. "I meant it's nice," he said. "It smells like cinnamon and laundry." I tried not to smile. "That's because I spilled a cinnamon candle on my sheets last week." We stayed up talking. For hours. About nothing and everything. Work, dating, or lack thereof. Old mutual friends we pretended to still keep in touch with. He told me his job sucked, but paid well. I told him I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. He didn't look surprised. Eventually, the conversation slowed, and the apartment got quiet in that late-night way it always does. The only sound was the soft ticking of the cheap wall clock I kept meaning to replace. Liam yawned and stretched, and I tried not to look at the sliver of skin that peeked out from under his borrowed t-shirt. "I should probably crash," he said. "Yeah," I replied, getting up. "I made up the couch. Sheets are clean. Blankets there." He nodded, then hesitated. "You still sleep in a furnace?" "I like it warm," I said. He smirked. "Yeah, I remember." There was a pause. Just a second too long. He looked at me like he was about to say something else, but didn't. Instead, he sat down, tugged the blanket over his lap, and offered a soft smile. "Thanks again, seriously," he said. I nodded. "Anytime." But here's the thing. I thought that would be it. I figured I'd wake up the next morning, he'd head out early, and I'd be left with an empty mug, and maybe a leftover scent on the couch cushion. I didn't expect to lie awake half the night, thinking about him just 10 feet away. And I definitely didn't expect what happened in the morning. I woke up to the smell of coffee. That was the first sign that something was off, because I never made coffee in the morning. I'm a roll out of bed and reheat yesterday's cup kind of guy. But this morning the air was warm and rich with that sharp, earthy scent of fresh brew. I sat up slowly, squinting toward the kitchen. Liam was standing there, shirtless, one hand wrapped around a mug, the other casually holding the hem of the t-shirt he'd clearly slept in, now draped over the back of a chair to dry. He looked good. In that unfair, effortless way some guys do when they haven't even brushed their teeth yet. His hair was messy, his jeans hung low on his hips, and he was humming something low and familiar. Morning, he said, catching me staring. Hey, I croaked, rubbing sleep from my eyes. You're up early. Couldn't sleep much, he said, sipping. Didn't want to just lie there doing nothing. Hope you don't mind. I found your coffee. You made it better than I ever do, I said, getting up and grabbing a mug from the shelf. You always were the responsible one. He smiled, but it was softer now. I was the one who couldn't fall asleep in strange places. I think that's more neurotic than responsible. I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter, trying not to make it weird. But the truth was, the apartment felt different this morning. Warmer. Livelier. Like the space had been filled in a way I hadn't even realized it was missing. So, he said, eyes flicking over to me. Was it weird? Having me here? I hesitated, then shrugged. No, just unexpected. Yeah, he said quietly. I get that. There was a beat of silence. Not awkward, exactly. Just loaded. Liam looked down at his cup. I almost didn't text you. Why? He gave a small, sheepish laugh. I don't know. We haven't talked in a while. I wasn't sure if I should. If you'd want me to. You're kidding, right? I said, raising an eyebrow. You were, like, one of the only people I actually liked from college. He glanced up at me, something unspoken flickering in his eyes. Yeah. Same. That should have been it. A nice nostalgic moment, coffee, a little laughter, but the way he was looking at me made my stomach twist. And not in a bad way, more like anticipation. Liam moved to the living room and flopped onto the couch, the same spot he slept in last night. He leaned back, stretching his arms over the top of the cushions and glanced around. This place really suits you, he said. Feels like you. Because it's small and chaotic? He chuckled. No, because it's quiet, comfortable. You always had this energy, even when everything was nuts. You made people feel steady. That caught me off guard. It wasn't the kind of thing people usually said to me. I wasn't used to being described like that, especially not by Liam, who I'd always seen as the one who had it all together. He looked over at me again, and something passed between us, a tension that had always hovered in the background, even back then. But now it felt different. Closer. I forgot how easy it is to talk to you, he said softly. My throat tightened a little. Same here. He didn't look away. You know, I used to wonder if things could have been different. That stopped me cold. I sat down, slowly, next to him. Different how? His jaw tensed. I don't know. Back then, I was confused. I wasn't ready to admit anything, not even to myself. I blinked, heart thudding. Liam. He looked down, fingers tapping the side of his mug. You remember that night after finals, when we stayed up watching that dumb documentary about whales? Yeah, he fell asleep on the couch. And I sat there for like an hour trying to figure out if I was allowed to feel the way I felt. My mouth went dry. What did you feel? He looked up, eyes meeting mine. And for the first time I saw it clearly. No jokes, no smirks, just him. Open, vulnerable. I think I liked you, he said quietly. Maybe more than I wanted to admit. The room went still. My heart was hammering in my chest, but all I could say was, why didn't you ever tell me? He gave a small, broken smile. Because I thought you'd laugh. Or worse, pretend it never happened. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at him. All the pieces of our past rearranging themselves in my head. Every moment I'd brushed off, every late-night glance, every near touch. I saw it all differently now. I wouldn't have, I said finally. I was into you too. His breath hitched. Seriously? Yeah, I said. And I guess I still am. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just sat there, in the middle of my small living room, with morning light slanting through the blinds and a silence that didn't need filling. Then he reached over, slowly, and placed his hand on mine. Just that. Nothing more. But it was enough to make my whole body light up. He smiled. I don't want to make this weird. It's already weird, I said. But maybe that's okay. He nodded. Yeah, maybe it is. We sat there for a long time. Just two guys drinking coffee, fingers lightly touching, pretending we weren't both trying to figure out how the hell to deal with whatever this was. And I remember thinking, he's gonna leave soon, and I don't want him to. Liam was supposed to head out after breakfast. That was the plan. Just one night, a couch to crash on, then back to his world. His train, his job, his life that didn't include me. But by noon, he was still there. We'd finished the coffee, watched half an episode of some cooking competition on mute, and talked about nothing for an hour like it was the most normal thing in the world. He sprawled across the couch like it belonged to him, like he belonged here. His arm was resting behind me on the cushion, and I could feel the edge of his pinky brushing my shoulder every now and then. It didn't feel accidental. I should have said something. About the time, or the train schedule, or the fact that my Saturday to-do list was collecting dust on the counter. Instead, I found myself saying, "You hungry?" He looked up from his phone. Starving. We ordered Thai food, the same place I always get delivery from, and he remembered my order before I even said it. I used to steal your spring rolls all the time, he said, grinning as he tapped his phone. I nodded, a little dazed. I remember. When the food arrived, we ate cross-legged on the floor like we used to back in our dorm room, the coffee table pushed aside. Liam dipped his spoon into my curry like it was a normal thing to do, and I didn't stop him. I couldn't. So, he sat around a mouthful of rice. Can I ask you something kind of personal? I glanced at him. Sure. Why didn't you ever say anything back then? I froze. The question hung there, suspended between us like steam off the curry. I guess, I hesitated. I didn't want to ruin what we had. You were always surrounded by girls. You dated that one girl for, 4 months. Jenna, he said, wincing. God, she hated that I spent so much time with you. Did she know? He shrugged. Maybe not exactly, but she knew there was something. That caught me off guard. Something? He met my eyes. Yeah, I don't think I realized it fully until later. But even then, I was always aware of you. The way you laughed at stuff no one else thought was funny. The way you'd stay up late just so I didn't feel like the only one struggling with school. I swallowed. You made it look easy. He shook his head. It wasn't. You made it easier. Silence settled between us again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that says more than small talk ever could. He reached for another spring roll, chewing thoughtfully. Then, out of nowhere, he said, Do you ever think about how things might have been if we talked about this back then? I exhaled slowly. All the time. His gaze softened. Yeah, me too. We finished eating in near silence. When we were done, he stood up, stretched, and said, I should probably head out. My stomach dropped. I nodded, trying to play it cool. Yeah, that makes sense. He went to the bathroom to change. I stood in the kitchen, putting leftovers into containers like it required intense concentration. My hands moved on autopilot, but my chest was tight. The whole apartment suddenly felt too quiet again. Too empty, even though he was still here. When he came back out, he was dressed in the same jeans and hoodie he wore last night. He slung his bag over his shoulder and glanced around like he was trying to remember the place, or maybe just taking in the memory of it. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Thanks again. Seriously, you didn't have to say yes. I shrugged, leaning against the counter. I'm glad I did. He looked like he wanted to say something else, something big, but instead he stepped toward the door. I followed him, heart hammering. At the door, he turned to face me. This might sound stupid, but I kinda don't want to go, my breath caught. Then don't, I said, before I could second guess it. His eyes searched mine. Are you serious? I nodded. I mean, you missed your train last night. What's one more night? He laughed quietly, that familiar nervous edge in his voice. Dangerous logic. I'm dangerous like that, I said, trying to smile. He set his bag down slowly, then stood there, Close. Too close. And when he spoke again, his voice was lower. You sure? I looked at him, really looked at him. The freckles near his nose. The crease at the corner of his mouth when he was trying not to smile. The version of him that I'd filed away as a what-if, standing right in front of me, real and present and completely throwing me off. I'm sure, I said, and before either of us could say another word, he leaned in. Just slightly, enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. But he stopped, right there in the pause, waiting. So I closed the space between us, just enough, and kissed him. It was slow, careful, like neither of us wanted to admit how long we'd been thinking about it. When we finally pulled back, he exhaled like he'd been holding it in for years. I should have missed that train a long time ago, he whispered. We didn't talk much after the kiss, not because there was nothing to say. God, there was so much I wanted to say, but because we both felt it. That fragile electric moment you don't dare mess with by talking too much. He stayed, not just physically on the couch or crashing for convenience, but emotionally, mentally, present. He stayed in this strange in-between space we'd cracked open, and neither of us tried to close it. It was nearly 2 p.m. before we actually moved from the door. He sat back down on the couch, bag long forgotten, and I sat beside him, legs tucked under me, heart still pounding like I'd just run up the stairs. We didn't touch, not yet. But there was this new tension hanging in the air, the kind you don't fight, because it means something's happening. Finally, I wasn't expecting that, he said, breaking the silence with a nervous smile. The kiss? Yeah, that, and this, you. I leaned back, trying to find the right words. I wasn't planning it either, he let out a breath. But you're not freaking out. I shook my head. Are you? No, just surprised. We both laughed quietly. That kind of laugh you let out when you know something's changing and you're not ready to admit it yet. I got up, made more coffee, and we sat with our mugs in that quiet again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't avoiding something, it was holding it, letting it settle. Eventually, he asked, so what happens now? I didn't have a perfect answer. I don't know. What do you want to happen? He looked down at his hands. I honestly don't know either. I just know I don't want to walk out that door pretending this didn't happen. Then don't, I said. Let's just stay here for now. See what this is. No pressure. He nodded slowly, like he needed to hear that more than he wanted to admit. We ended up watching a movie, not because we cared about the plot, but because it gave us something to do while figuring out how to be in the same room now that everything had shifted. His knee bumped against mine once, twice, and when I didn't move away, he didn't either. At one point, I looked over and caught him staring. Not like before, playful, teasing, but like he was studying me, memorizing, trying to understand how we got here. I always wondered, he said quietly. I muted the movie. Wondered what? If you ever felt the same. If I'd just said something earlier, would we have figured this out already? Would we have been something? I let that sink in. Yeah, I did feel it. I just didn't know if I was allowed to. He gave a half smile, one that didn't quite hide the regret behind it. Same. There was something honest about the way he said it. No performance, no ego, just the raw truth between us, finally dragged into the light. I shifted on the couch, turning toward him. Hey, we can't change what we didn't say back then, but we can decide what we do now. He didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, he reached for my hand. Fingers tentative at first, then steady, warm. We sat like that for a long time, hand in hand, silence thick with something tender and unspoken. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was real, quiet, the kind of moment you don't notice until you're inside it. And then he looked over at me with that same smirk he used to wear when he knew he was pushing a boundary. So, you still hog the blankets? I laughed. Only if you sleep in my bed. His eyebrows raised. Is that an invitation? I didn't blink. It's a warning. He grinned, leaned in close again, but stopped just before our lips met. I'm really glad I missed my train, he whispered. I kissed him again, a little firmer this time. A little less afraid. And just like that, The couch was no longer where he slept. The first night we shared my bed didn't go how you'd think. There was no dramatic music, no passionate flurry of limbs and confessions. Just two guys, lying side by side, breathing the same late-night air, trying to figure out where to put their arms without overthinking it. But there was something heavier about that night. In a good way. We talked. A lot. More than we had in years. He laid on his side, one arm under the pillow, the other resting somewhere between us, fingers lightly brushing the edge of my blanket. He wasn't touching me. Not really. But he was close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin, the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing. "Do your parents know?" he asked at one point. "About me being into guys," I replied. "Yeah, I told them last year." He looked over at me. "How'd they take it?" "Better than I expected. Not great. Not awful. Mostly confused, but they're trying." He nodded slowly, like he understood that all too well. "Mine don't know. I mean, I think my mom suspects, but it's not something we've ever talked about." I stayed quiet. Let him keep going. I always told myself it didn't matter, like I'd deal with it later. But now, I don't know. Being here with you makes it harder to pretend. His voice cracked just a little at the end. I reached over and took his hand. That simple, instinctive thing. He didn't flinch. He didn't joke or pull away. He just held it back. We lay there in silence for a while after that, fingers loosely tangled together on top of the blanket. The city buzzed softly outside. Car tires on wet pavement, the occasional honk, someone shouting 2 blocks away. But inside the apartment, it felt still. Safe. "I used to think about this, you know," he said, breaking the quiet. "Back when we were in school. Us. You and me." "Me too," I said. "But I thought it was just in my head." "Maybe it was," he said, squeezing my hand gently. "But I guess it doesn't matter now. Because it's real." I turned toward him, our faces barely a foot apart in the dark. "It is," I said. "It's real." He let out a soft breath, and we fell asleep like that. Hands clasped, hearts exposed, unsure of what tomorrow would look like, but knowing, somehow, it was worth finding out. The next morning, I woke up before him. The sun was bleeding through the curtains, and for a while I just lay there watching him sleep. His lashes twitched every now and then. His lips parted slightly. He looked younger, softer. And I realized something that scared me a little. I didn't want this to be temporary. Not just the warm body next to mine, or the unexpected hand-holding in the dark. I didn't want him to leave. Not later that day, not after the weekend, not at all. It was such a dumb thought, right? He came over because he missed his train. That's it. We weren't a couple. We weren't even defined. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if he walked out now, it would leave this hollow thing in me. So I got up, made coffee again, and hoped he'd still be here when I turned around. He was, wrapped in the blanket like a burrito, hair a complete mess, blinking blearily as he sat up on one elbow. "Did I oversleep?" he asked, voice scratchy. "No," I said. "There's no schedule." He looked at me for a beat, then smiled. "Good." We ate breakfast on the balcony, wrapped in hoodies and holding mugs like shields against the cool breeze. He looked out over the city like he was seeing it for the first time. "I don't want to go back today," he said. "Then don't," I said, surprising even myself with how fast it came out. He turned to me, searching my face. "Seriously?" I nodded. "Stay, another night, or 2, however long you want." He smiled into his mug, like he was trying to hide it but didn't really want to. "I might take you up on that." I reached over and hooked my pinky around his. "Good," I said, "because I'm not ready for you to go." He laced his fingers through mine. "Then I'm not going anywhere." 3 nights. That's how long he stayed. It stopped being about the train after the first night. The second night was already something else. Half playful domesticity, half quiet touches and long looks. By the third, We weren't pretending anymore. There were toothbrushes lined up next to each other in the bathroom, his socks in my laundry basket, his laugh in my kitchen. He was living in my space like he belonged there. And maybe he did. But that morning, the morning after the third night, I caught him standing by the window, phone in hand, biting his thumbnail, a familiar look on his face. "What's up?" I asked, rubbing sleep from my eyes. He looked over at me, startled, then dropped his hand. "Nothing, just checking work stuff." "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just stuff I need to deal with when I get back." I nodded, even though the shift in his tone was hard to miss. His voice had that tightness in it again, like something was weighing on him. I poured coffee and slid a mug across the counter to him. He took it, sipped it, then finally spoke again. "My boss texted. He wants me back in the office tomorrow." "Oh, yeah." It was quiet for a minute. "I can stay tonight," he said quickly, like he didn't want the silence to mean something worse. "If that's okay." Of course it is, but it didn't feel like the other nights. Not quite. He was still sweet, still affectionate, still present in that gentle, careful way he had. But I could feel the clock ticking now, and so could he. We spent the afternoon running errands, partly to get out of our heads, partly because it was something couples did. He grabbed snacks at the store like he was restocking our pantry. He picked out a movie at the Redbox kiosk and said, "This one's so bad we have to watch it." And every time he said something that sounded like a "we," something inside me twisted. That night, after the credits rolled and we were lying on the couch again, I leaned into him, head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat under the cotton of his t-shirt. "You don't have to go," I said quietly. "Not yet." He ran his fingers slowly through my hair. "I know," he said, "but I should." I didn't answer. I didn't know how to. "I'm not saying this is over," he added quickly, like he needed me to know. "I just need to figure out how to make space for it, for you, for us." My throat tightened. What if this only works because it's here, in my apartment, in this little bubble where no one else exists? He sat up a little, looked at me. "Do you really think that?" I hesitated. I don't want to, but it's easy to fall into something when the world is paused. It's harder when it's moving again. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is. But I still want it," I said. "Even if it's messy, even if we have to figure it out in pieces." A long silence followed. Then he said, "Me too." We stayed like that for a long time, just touching, not speaking, as if talking would scare the whole thing away. In the morning, he packed quietly. Not like he was sneaking out, but like he didn't want to make a big thing of it. His toothbrush stayed in the bathroom. I noticed it and didn't say anything. "I'll text you when I get back," he said at the door. I nodded. "Call me." He leaned in, kissed me slow, one hand on my jaw, the other resting lightly at my waist. It wasn't a goodbye kiss, it was a promise. Then he was gone. The apartment felt too quiet again, like it had gone back to the way it was before he arrived. But it hadn't, not really, because he was in the room even after he left. In the coffee, he taught me how to brew better. And the dumb movie still paused on my screen, and the way my bed still smelled faintly like him. And even though the door had closed, something between us had stayed open. The first day without him was the hardest. It wasn't even about missing his physical presence. Though, yeah, the apartment felt hollow, without the echo of his laughter, or the sound of him pacing in his socks. It was the absence of the little things. The casual way he said my name. The half-squeezed toothpaste he left in the sink. The half-finished bag of chips I found in the cupboard with a note inside that said, "Don't eat all of these without me, traitor." The note made me laugh, and then it made me sit down on the floor and stare at nothing for a solid 10 minutes. He texted that afternoon. "Got in okay. Work was a disaster. Miss you already." I stared at that last part for a while. Miss you already. There it was. Clear and undeniable. We weren't just two friends who blurred a line. We weren't a fling. This wasn't about convenience or a train schedule. It was something real. Over the next few days, we talked constantly, not just texts, actual phone calls, late night FaceTimes. He'd prop up his phone on his pillow, and I'd do the same, both of us lying there in our separate beds, talking until one of us fell asleep mid-sentence. He told me about his clients. I told him about my neighbor's cat that kept trying to break into my kitchen window. It wasn't dramatic, it was just life, but shared. He started saying goodnight like he meant it, like it hurt a little not to be in the same room. And I started waking up, checking my phone before doing anything else. Then one night, 5 days after he left, he said, "I've been thinking about coming back this weekend." I blinked at the screen. "You mean like visiting?" He shrugged, smile half there. "Or just seeing where this goes, for real. I can work remote a few days. Try it out." I sat there in silence, trying not to sound too eager, trying not to let my heart go sprinting down the hallway before I knew what door it was heading for. "You sure?" I asked. "Not totally," he said. "But I want to be. I want to try." I smiled. "Then come back." He arrived on Saturday. No suitcase this time. Just a backpack, a hoodie, and that same nervous energy from the first night. Except now it was different. Now I'd kissed him. Now I knew how he looked when he was half asleep, and smiling against my pillow, I opened the door, and there he was. "This time I didn't miss my train," he said. I stepped aside. "I know. You chose to come back." He walked in, dropped his bag, and pulled me into a hug that felt like a chapter closing, and another one opening all at once. We didn't make any big declarations that night. There was no need. Everything was already there. In the way he folded his hoodie over the back of my chair, in how he kicked off his shoes by the door, in how he took my hand without hesitation when we sat down on the couch. "I don't want to leave again," he said. "Then don't," I replied. And he didn't. Weeks passed. Then months. And yeah, we had our moments. Figuring out how to share space, how to disagree without reverting to silence, how to be two full people building something together. It wasn't always smooth, but it was honest. He never really moved in officially. His stuff just sort of stayed, and so did he. One night, as we lay in bed, half asleep, he whispered, "You know what's funny?" "What?" "I spent a year telling myself I missed a train. Turns out, I didn't miss anything." I looked over at him. "What do you mean?" He smiled in the dark. "I just took the long way home.